Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to our second installment of the Men of Steel Week. We got a real special guest today. We got Mark's dad. How do you like that? And it's really good because this guy has got a lot of knowledge of old school. So everybody who likes all the old school stuff going on, you'll love it. Let me get rid of that banner there for you, and let me bring in one of the Men of Steel right there. There's Mr. Mark Steele. How you doing, buddy?
What's going on, Jimmy? Long time no see.
Yeah, right?
It's been a whole 24 hours maybe, so here we are again.
That's it. Yeah, it's weird. I can't really do this. Well, you see a difference in my set here? I changed something.
You changed your microphone cover.
Right, there we go. And in honor of the Golden Knights, hey, they start tonight, the 7-game series against the Blackhawks.
Great.
So keep it on until they lose. That's it. That's the way it's going to be. So hopefully they'll stay on. So with that, let me bring in the second Man of Steel, okay? And there he is, Mr. Albert Steele. How you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you, Jimmy. Nice to be with you and son Mark. Actually, by chronological order, I would be the first Man of Steel. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a second.
Okay, no problem. No problem. We can live with that one.
I'm a man of stats, so I can tell you that the Blackhawks are 1-8 against the Knights, so we're looking good.
The only thing that I'm afraid of, okay, and then we'll get off the sports thing. The only thing I'm afraid of is because I always know that when you get into these playoffs, right, scenarios, and you got your best of 7, the hottest team coming in is the scary one. So right now, everybody's healthy, so it's like starting day 1, but these guys are the lowest number seed coming in playing the best seed, the Golden Knights got to watch out because these guys played more games and they got nothing to lose. You know what I mean? But it is what it is, right?
At least the roar of the crowd won't deter them.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, because the Knights are known for having one of the best home ice advantages in all of hockey, and now they're not going to have anything. So
true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So, it is what we have to do. So all good. All good.
Great. So, Dad, thanks for being on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, we'd like to have a nice, well-versed, rounded group of guests. If you've watched us before, we have people front of the house, back of the house, beverage people in casinos. And, one thing that you always hear about, especially with everything that's going on, is the pandemic and how Las Vegas needs to revert back to its old ways of hospitality and really taking care of the guests. And especially with Dalila yesterday, we focus on it a lot. And it was a good segue into having you that's already here because, obviously you've been in, I'm not going to steal any of your thunder and let you tell some of your stories, but you've been here for a long time. You've seen Las Vegas evolve from what it is into what it is right now. And you had successful businesses here, and we definitely want to hear your story. But it's a pleasure for anyone who's going to be watching us to make sure that you ask questions. My dad has a lot of experience in Las Vegas experience, and again, I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he's taking care of a lot of Vegas themed guests. And feel free, because this is a bridge of a gap that you're not going to really see or have direct communication with. So any questions you might have about any nuances of old celebrities, this is a time to ask, and this is the time to put all those rumors to the end and just really see what's going on. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for the invite. I watch your shows, Jimmy V. Jimmy V
like
Live.
them, huh?
Oh yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
Jimmy V Live and Mark Steele.
As you say,
it's better being live than the other option there. Better stay 6 feet apart than 6 feet under, Jimmy V. That's what.
Yeah, right. That's what you did. That's what you got to know. I had a little technical difficulty, Mark. I forgot to put our stream on Facebook. So my son runs in here and goes, "Hey, you got nothing on Facebook?" I just figured it out. I'm glad I got good with the software. But anyway, everyone should be seeing us on Facebook as well now. So that's good.
Hello, Facebook.
You cannot have the Men of Steel not on Facebook, right? We got to make sure you guys are on Facebook. Yeah, so let me ask you something, Albert. Let me ask you something. So you ran a bunch of, I don't know how many restaurants, but you had restaurants back in the day, right?
Yes.
Which one? What happened back in the day?
Well, if you want to go back, as they say in the day, let's start at the beginning. And first of all, let's quell the rumors that I was a busboy at the Last Supper. That was not the case.
Okay.
I'm from England, London, and actually I started out in law. I'll make this short because I can see your face is already dropping, but it might be of some amusement.
Nah.
I started out in law, actually, Wild Sapton Company in Old Broad Street, down in the heart of the city of London. I was an article clerk, which is the equivalent of doing an internship. You spend half the day in the law office and half the day at the university studying to be a lawyer. What you call it here, we call it a barrister or solicitor there. And just to go to the basics, because we always look for the facts and figures, I was making £5 a week, which is $10 a week. I know it was way back then, but it wasn't much to get by on in those times. So part-time, actually our law firm were the only ones that were counsels, barristers and solicitors, they say, to the royal family. We had the big crest outside the door. It was very impressive when you step in. And but I was in the department that was wills and divorces. Divorces, actually, in the royal family are prohibited if they do come along. In those days, I don't know what the rules and regulations are now. It would take 7 years before they could go to the court for the court's decision as to if they could get divorced. And I was also in the will department. And so if somebody dies, literally they bequeath, and we go back to the scrolls and stuff. And we go back to the Battle of Hastings almost to see who got the property. So needless to say, there was little to be done. The pay wasn't anything, but most of our work were the employees from Buckingham Palace. And they were, after the gig with the Queen, they would go out and be drunk and disorderly. And that would just be the women. But there were plenty of action with them. And so we got to become friends. And when they had an event out at Buckingham Palace, they signed me up as an assistant valet. Yeah. And we would line up, and that would be £50 a night.
Wow.
Not being a bright guy, but I figured that £50 a night would be about $100. Still good now. That's where I was going to go. So consequently, I started working parties at Buckingham Palace. And then we would always get on call as a butler or assistant butlers to embassies around town. And so I was always on call for the French embassy, the American embassy, and the Persian, which is now the Iranian embassy. So consequently, £50 to £100 sometimes with a little gratuity, I decided that's where I wanted to be in the food and beverage. So my next step was to go to the epicenter of food and beverage, to Paris. So I lined up a job at the British embassy there as an assistant butler. And when I got there, being trapped with stiff upper lift lords and ladies, it wasn't as much fun as when I went around the corner to the American embassy. And I said, this is where I want to be. And they were just hiring for food and beverage. They had canteens, 2 or 3 restaurants that we catered at the embassy, probably a staff of, not a staff, small staff of 200-300, but 3,000 guests from UNESCO, all of the other embassies around town, around Paris, that is. So consequently, that's where I decided to go in food and beverage. And now I had my sights set on the US of A. So consequently, I started work the ambassador's residence. And one day that was Ambassador Sergeant Shriver. He's married to Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who was the sister of JFK. And one day they said, do you want to come to the USA with us? And yep. Before they could finish the conversation, I had my shopping bags packed and I was on my way here. So when I got to the States, I became a butler for not only the Sergeant Shriver and Eunice, but to Mrs. Robert Kennedy, Senator Ted Kennedy, and most of the Kennedy families. And when they all got together in Hyannisport, I would be down there working and they call the Winter White House would be down in Florida. So it was a good intro to the US of A, as they say, and it never did any harm when applying for a job later. You say, "Oh, where have you worked?" "Well, I was a butler for the Kennedy." Did I mention butler for the Kennedy? Boom, come aboard. So it worked out very well. To get back to the restaurant business, when they opened the Kennedy Center, they had not lots of, several positions that were akin to a butler in the private restaurants that they had, which they don't have any longer, and also a maitre d's job at Le Grand Seine, which was just a purely opulent restaurant, which is no longer there, I believe, either. So I became the maitre d' there. Obviously, going from Kennedy family to the Kennedy Center was a given, but it worked out to be just another stepping stone. And eventually, all of us, not all of us, I'm using the royal we because we in French and royal, we say that. 3 or 4 of us went to open up a restaurant in Georgetown called Le Pauvre Immigrant, the poor immigrant, and we're all immigrants, not necessarily all with papers, but that's another story. They weren't as strong in those days as they are now. We would never have opened. So I went there, and now we're coming to the crux of how I got to Las Vegas. One of my captains at the restaurant, Angelo Tavernero, said, "A man of your talents, you should go to Las Vegas." And of course, I believe him and think I'm a talented man. So up with the family we went. Stephanie, my wife, was very game. The kids, we just threw them in the car, and we came to Las Vegas. He forgot to mention, however, that when we got here, well, the time we did get here was late '69, November, that in those days, the town was deserted from November, December, January, no conventions in those days. So I couldn't get a job in any of the hotels because you had to be really old time and hooked up with the union. So I got a job at the world famous Ye Old Lobster House. I don't know if you're around in those days, any of you guys, across from the Castaways. And I was an illustrious busboy. So coming from Buckingham Palace to the Kennedy family to a busboy on the Strip wasn't the great move I was looking for. The only move I was looking for was to kill Angelo Tavernero, to tell you the truth, for his high recommendation. And but then on it, we turned up and went to MGM. They opened Cafe Gigi. I don't know if you guys remember that that was the old MGM before the fire hit, unfortunately. And then from there to Caesar's Palace. And they opened up, which was even far more opulent than Le Grand Seine, the Palace Court. And that became, after 3 or 4 years, I think I do have a picture here of it. I don't know if you can see it. How does that look? I got to find it. Higher up, my way up. And as you can see, and then they had a lounge for higher up still. How about that?
Wow. Yep.
Check that out.
Check that out. And that was, check what, my face being covered? No. That's had a dance floor outside, a lounge with a 60-foot roof that slid back at nights, ficus trees, as you can see in the center, and every star in the world. We became #1 restaurant on photos and all the travel guides throughout the world. So that was, it was a great spot to be in. In those days, everybody was comp, and that means that the checks were no charge and the gratuities were good. I think we passed by the statute of limitations, so I can say the tips were good.
What year was those days?
72, 70, actually 71, after the Lobster House, then into 77, 78.
So you've seen a big change in Las Vegas.
Huge change. There were only, when I spoke of the Castaways, there were only probably about 6 hotels on the Strip, all in those days. And of course, what we see now is just mind-boggling. One would never have thought we'd become that way. So consequently, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of stars along the way. It was just surreal actually to be in Las Vegas in those years, and they were building. It was a vibrant town, and I don't want to say everything was free if you were local, but you could certainly go buy 2 drinks at a lounge, see class acts. They were openers for some of the headliners. You get the old 995 prime rib dinners, all 3 courses. You could go to the bootlegger. They'd have excellent veal, still do, veal chops, etc. All around the very low range, and just consequently, far, far from where we are now. Far more reasonable and a very much oriented, value-oriented town. Rooms were very cheap, and you play a few games. They comp you the room. I mean, just you come a semi-good player, they get tickets to the show, and we're talking top acts in the world. So it was where we've come today. I feel we are pricing ourselves out.
Oh yeah, and you know what
So
you're saying, it makes sense because my father-in-law, when he came to Vegas around the same time frame, from my understanding with Sonia, my wife, and all, that he worked as a banquet server in the Frontier. So
okay,
the
excellent.
stories he told me, about the way it was, like somebody wanted what's that core market that's escaping me now? What people go crazy for, the type of champagne?
Dom
I don't.
Pignon?
Yeah, he said they used to give it away. There was
Oh
no,
yes.
like, it wasn't like locked up and counted, and things were so different back then. So I can relate to what you're saying.
And of course, it was allegedly most of the casinos were mob run, and uh, the hierarchy was certainly uh, more forceful in protecting the town. That's all I can say.
Right.
Nobody would step out of line. I mean, Old Man Binion's downtown. I'm not speaking off the record here, but if you try to get smart on the dice pit with your own dice, you'd end up eating them. So that
I
would
get it. I
that
get
that
it.
would that would control the crowd. Yeah, the sheriff's lamb would walk the town literally, stop by and just check everything was okay, and it was. It was.
So I got a
Unlike
nice,
now,
I got a good question for you. Now we're
please.
talking the 70s, and all my health department friends that are listening, you can shut your ears. Did you really see the health department back then?
To be honest, until you mentioned it, why would I lie to you? I didn't know there was a health department.
Okay.
We didn't. Well, let me say, I do know we had to go down for the X-ray and the test, but the test was nowhere near extensive as it is today,
Right.
and it's much needed. Let's clarify that. But we didn't have to know the temperatures of chicken, well done, underdone, the refrigeration. We knew what cleanliness was, and I always wonder before COVID, why did people wash their hands? So they didn't wash their hands because there's a big push to wash your hands. What did they do before? So, but the health department is much needed now. Of course, the town is
Right.
huge, as they say. So consequently, but no health department, and so very few inspections. And I would assume when the health department was coming, we'd put a little more polish to everything because it wasn't. They weren't as stringent as they are today. Now I don't know if that's. Did we have more outbreaks of whatever in those days? Jimmy, you would know, like salmonella and all those things which are very detrimental, obviously, to our business now, and especially to the amount of volume we do in this town.
They did, but technology was different, and I know, speaking to the old time health district people that were there for many, many, many years, it wasn't as many people as they have employed now. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
things were different back then, but no, it existed. I don't think it was to the extent of what it is right now, because there's a lot of new stuff out there now, especially this COVID. A lot of things were called something different, And here I got one right here. Hang on one second. Here's a good one right here. This is Herb, my friend Herb, and he's from the health department. He heard about the Vinions. His old, if you see his old friend Vern Elliott told him the same thing. What health
Sure.
department? You see,
We
so
know.
you're not
I know.
alone. You're not
I
alone.
know.
See,
No, you're not alone.
you're not alone. So it was different, you know. And I spoke to man's not with us anymore, Lonnie Empey. He was an old time health inspector, and he came up from the very beginning. He would tell me stories too. It wasn't like it was back then, Jim. You know, we worked, but it was different. Things were different, and nobody saw the health department. But no, that's great insight, you know, because a lot of us, my generation, and then you get the new generation, all they know is the way Vegas is now, you know. And I
Yes.
know I mentioned it yesterday that remember when Vegas took the shift to the kids, like trying to get the kids in with the
Circus.
Yeah, that was the 60s, right? Circus was the 60s, if I'm not
60s.
mistaken.
And
Yeah.
they couldn't cater to the kids quickly enough. Luxor was another spot that they built specifically with families in mind. And MGM put on a theme park at the back of the MGM property. I can't remember the name of it now. They had it for about a year and a half. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
MGM Grand Adventures.
MGM Grand Adventures. What they came to realize very quickly that when everybody is with the kids and out playing with the kids, they're not gambling too much.
No.
So they cut back on that very, very quickly. And of
So,
course, the wife is.
Go ahead, Ed.
I'm just when the wife is there with the kids, and you can't gamble, you can't hit the old ATM machine that often because what are you doing? Where's the money? You know how that goes. And the kids, look at the kids. What are you doing? So consequently, they abandoned it. Circus now, because it's been around forever, it's probably the only kids spot that I can think of. The circuit that's opening downtown are going to be an adult only
Right.
hotel.
I think everything's going back that way. You
Yeah.
know.
That'll be
Not an adult as per se, adults only shows, but
Right.
yeah, adults.
I think the shows like Jubilee are long gone, right?
Long gone, because so they have the productions like those were phenomenal. And here again, 1950 for about an hour and a half spectacle, $25 to see Sinatra if you didn't get comped.
Wow.
Dean Martin, all of the stars. I mean, that's the Tom Jones. That was the price range. And as you may remember, you're not old enough, but stars used to do 2 shows every night. So the first show was a dinner show, and the second show was a cocktail show. And they used to really work for the money, work hard for the money, with only one day off. That would be Mondays was the dark day. And consequently, they really used to. I'm laughing at your wife's comment.
Yeah, right.
Used to be an adult Disneyland, and she's correct. But here again, it's just a question that we have to get back to being more value orientated than. I went out for a drink before COVID hit. I shan't say the name of the hotel because one of my family works there. It was $24 for a specialty martini, $12 for a beer. Then you throw in parking on top of that, which was $15 after the first hour. All of this adds up. I mean, to sum it up, I wouldn't go back again. And then as Delilah pointed out yesterday, they jab you with the resort fees.
Oh.
I mean, for everything there's a charge. And now we are seeping back to eliminating those extra fees that very quickly parking and for the nights, which you have to pay overnight, $40, and your resort fee, that's an extra $75 on top of the hotel room.
Right.
Well, we have to remember that 30 million people in the United States are unemployed, and they're not going to have surplus money for vacations, especially an expensive one.
Right. And you
I'll
remember
just
Vegas used to always be known as grab the flight, fly. I remember when I was in Florida, and I would come out here on my first couple times. Yeah, you just take flight 777 from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Las Vegas for $99.
exactly, yes,
But
and room
I remember that.
room and food for a couple of nights as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
Wow.
think this will be my last point of preaching on where we're headed. Last year, according to the gaming board, the winnings for Nevada were 1.5 billion from gaming only. So let's bring back cheaper everything. And if they make half a billion, you can get by on half a billion.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, they'll survive.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's the direction we have to lean, because the days of the, let's say, the high rollers coming here are limited. I know people that still work. One of my friends is the head valet at butler at Caesar's Palace.
Hmm.
And with all the international travel cut down, the 14-day quarantine, the local high rollers don't come here anymore, or at least not at present. So, as I say, it's not, and half of everything is closed and no shows. So why would they come here instead of going to their own home state, of which only 8 or 9 states in the United States don't have casinos or gambling? Why would they come here? So
Yeah.
we'll have to get it back and get more of the market
We got to
for.
attract them, right, Mark? We got to
All
attract
right.
them back.
Yeah, this is true. So I'm going to jump in real fast because let's not. I mean, let's go back a couple more steps. Let's not talk about the health department or any of that right now. We want to hear some good stories about some celebrities. You've already alluded to it several times.
Absolutely.
Tell us about some celebrities you took care of. Who's a pain in the butt. They're probably passed away by now, so I don't think they'll come after you. Who was known for being a pain in the butt, but he was great. What are some special stories that you kind of have about some of the celebrities you took care of in the heyday here?
Well, I'd like to know from Delilah. She mentioned one person yesterday, and I think I can mention her name because she is universally acknowledged in Las Vegas as being, I can't say the most difficult because that would give her some credit, but the a difficult person would be Barbara Streisand. And Delilah mentioned not who it was, but Miss Streisand has all of the attributes that Delilah spoke about that make a person very annoying. They don't talk to the server directly. They'll talk through a third person like you're not there. And would you like the steak? Not if she's a vegan, not vegan, but vegetarian at times. She'll look and medium rare. So medium rare. No, make that medium well, medium well. So you're going around, you've got a house full, and you've got to deal with a third person like you're the invisible man. And let's say at the end of the day, the gratuity was very light. So consequently, that makes it very difficult. She's famous for telling where she stays, the hotel, everybody knows where she performs, that staff are forbidden to look her in the eye, otherwise they'll be fired. And she's kind of obviously looking to see who's looking, and the maids or the room service, they're instructed not to, and they look up by mistake and she'll be right on the phone. And they're all of a sudden, they don't fire them, of course, thank God for the union. They'll move them to another floor until she's left. But things like that don't endear you to people. And so I can put her at the top of my list that I will pass should I ever have to serve her again in the next stage in life.
I was never a fan of her ever growing up. I can tell you that much. And
Yeah.
Someone once told me she married James Brolin, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
and it's not Barbara and James Brolin, it's Barbara and James Streisand. I
Yes.
can leave it at that.
A friend of mine, we'll call her Marie Zabi, had a place in Malibu that was 2 or 3 houses down from her, and she was Maria sold since then, so we can talk about it. Not a very comfortable neighbor, and we'll leave it at that. And that's the feeling in Malibu. I believe they're still there.
What
Not
about
that
the
I-
good one? What about the good
Good
one?
ones. I wouldn't have to even guess. Secondly, Tom Jones by a mile. He was a pleasure to wait on, uh, and just a gentleman. Very concerned. Are the employees okay? Are we staying too late? And he would come after work with the group of us from Caesars down to our hangouts. We would have the small room at the top of Shadow Vegas. I don't know if you remember that spot. The Flame had a nice bar. And he would join us, buy rounds, and just generally enjoy himself. He loved the place on that sold chicken wings, a bar, can't think of the name of it, escapes me, on Sahara. That's not much of a clue. But he never forgot his roots. As a side note, when he performed, he was from Wales, performed in the pubs in England for about 40, 50 pounds, $150 a night for him and his group. And he would stay 2 or 3 to a room for 20, 30 pounds a night. And he never forgot that. And he would laugh. We got along very well. He would laugh, and he would laugh about the digs, as we used to call them, where he used to live, sharing a bathroom. And now he's at a 10,000 suite at Caesars with bathrooms for everybody at Caesars. So he never forgot that, and he was just a gentleman. And you'll find that to my comments about Barbara, I wouldn't make them out of line, but if you ask around about her, Tom Jones definitely would be ranked very high amongst people, and we can only go by how you treat people. And he's one of the top.
So
Mark?
tell us about the Rat Pack. Tell us.
Yes, I was just about to say the same thing.
The Rat Pack actually.
Enough Tom Jones. Let's talk about what people really want to know about. Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis. I know you take care of all of them. Tell us some stories.
I did, but not as the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack folded just before I got here. They were thrown out of the Sands, literally, even though they were a big draw there, because Mr. Sinatra had a dispute over some debts, and you can read that in the Review Journal, that he hadn't. So that's why he left. But when he came to Caesars Palace Court, he was the headliner. Here again, doing 2 shows a night. He was supposed to be a difficult person to work for. He was actually always very, very nice to me, called me the English guy. And he remembered my name after a period of time, Albert, because his middle name was Albert. So there was not a connection, but it was just funny. He was just, and he did have his moments, even at Caesars. He nailed with a right punch, one of the floormen down there, well documented again, nothing speaking out of, who questioned how he was throwing the dice or something or whatever. So he would let his feelings and emotions. I'm reading these little things down there.
I know. You're asking questions about you, and I just learned how to play with this. Do you know Sam?
I don't. Doesn't ring a bell. From where, Eric? If you can hear me.
Repeat. Eric, let us know. Type another thing in because he wants to know who Sam Altieri is.
I'm going to keep an eye out for my ex-wives here. They all have the same last name, Plaintiff. So when it shows up here, I got to maybe fold the other way or whatever. Just one wife. Just joking. But Sinatra would come and he wanted the same thing. He just would like everything as he wants it. His Jack Daniels with 3 ice cubes. And as long as everything he had to be under pressure between shows. As long as everything was right. And he was a golden boy. He had a reputation for being a high roller. 1 white chip for a couple of people, going to a couple of white chips to 3 white chips for those that weren't around in the way we really were. White chip was $500. So in and out, basically, an hour and a half, and just a gracious guy. Never had a problem with him, and he knew what he wanted when he gets that, like anybody else. he was satisfied. And then at the end of the night, on my closing rounds, I'd have to drop, when they do the second show, 2 bottles of Jack Daniels, a bucket of ice, and glasses to the side of the stage, and he'd haul it on stage and he'd perform. And they would say, I don't. I would have to contact, sorry, looking at Bud Letter Caesar for 35 years.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
answer your question.
The only butlers I know are the ones that are currently, I'm still my good friend. But I wasn't attached to the butler department there. I was a captain and then assistant maitre d' at the Palace Court. To get back to Sinatra, when he or Tom Jones, Willie Nelson, they'd all have their drinks up for the second show. And if they felt the crowd, as they say, he'd stay for an hour and a half over. And boy, did he have them eating out of the hands of his. Wasn't a dry house. The mobsters wasn't a dry house, dry eye in the house when he sang "My Way" at the end of the night. Really, I feel emotional just talking about it right now. I'm just joking.
Yeah, there was I've done a lot of research on Frank Sinatra and Jack Daniels, and Jack Daniels was really, really a small brand that was just a pedestrian spirit in the United States until about the mid '60s, and all of a sudden it exploded, and they didn't know what to do, and it took them almost 2 years to recover. 20 years to recover, replenish all of their stocks, and they figured out that because Frank Sinatra, wherever he went to go tour, he wouldn't go without Jack Daniels. If they didn't carry Jack Daniels, he wouldn't go there. And of course, wherever he went, all thousands of people would want and drink the same thing and go back home. Absolutely. So Jack Daniels 100% attributes their success to him.
Oh, I can believe that. He would have a toast at the end of the night, or with a couple of more songs to go. He'd get Jack Daniels, and of course, you wouldn't. Everyone that's seen the show before, I would stay and watch his show every night. The last few songs, I did work for a living, but they would all drink shots of Jack Daniels. That's 1,000 people in the showroom. Yep. Let's say 50% of them just toasting with him. Boy, I can see you're 100% correct with the Jack Daniels marketing there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how about how about Dean Martin or Sammy Davis? Have you ever taken care of them individually?
Yes, Sammy Davis would actually come in with Sinatra from time to time. Just an interesting side note, because it always fascinates me, about the Rat Pack when they performed at the Sands in the mid-'60s, 64, 65. Las Vegas was a segregated town. And I didn't learn that till about a year and a half ago. So Sammy Davis or Count Basie or whoever the band was playing, any black entertainers, they weren't allowed to drink at the bars or eat in the restaurants. So they would obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, they would have some room service, but they would also have a couple of restaurants that they could go to on the way out of town, where Sammy Davis couldn't stay here, of course. We stayed at the Moulin Rouge downtown, where all the black entertainers stayed. But Sinatra, here again, with the rest of the Rat Pack, Peter Lawford, they would all go down to that neck of the woods, which meant huge, huge business for the Moulin Rouge. So that to get back to Sammy Davis, just a very pleasant, very modest, very humble guy. Dino Martin was Dino Martin. He'd perform at MGM. He'd come for dinner, half in the bag, and would top the fuel tank to the max just in time for the 7, which would be the 8 o'clock show. Then in his days, they were down to 1 shows. But just a convivial guy that you wouldn't believe. Happiest guy in the USA, and just pleasure to take care of. I mean, it's amazing how all of these people, and in those days, nobody troubled the stars, as we say. Obviously, there were no selfies, but they would respect their distance. And when they were coming and going from the show, they gathered them. But if they're out playing craps, eating dinner, drinking at a bar, they wouldn't. Nobody would trouble them. And now, of course, they just mob them everywhere they go. So I can see them being somewhat more reticent as to being accommodating and nice to their supporters or fans.
Did they comp a lot of those besides dinner, but did they comp a lot of those shows to people?
Probably about 50%.
Ah,
That's 1,000 people. The showroom held 800. Fire department wasn't around, I guess. But if you give the door a golden handshake, they'd build a table for you with a certain whatever chairs you want right in front. So you sit down for the Sinatra show, and you tip the guy pretty good, and all of a sudden you're right looking up at the stage, and then after a few minutes you find yourself about 5 rows back because you just keep bringing tables out for the high rollers that are coming. And at the Palace Court we would seat in the opening days, and it certainly wasn't cheap. Let's say the average check in those days, without caviar, without Dom Perignon was the big seller, of course, but the finest French wines. And Angelo Tavernero, my nemesis, was the sommelier there. He was one of the first one or two in town. Now, of course, it's a whole industry. But we would serve 300 to 400, 500 midweek, 600 from Hollywood. Everybody would come in, especially if there was a fight. It would all be comp. The whole book red was our ink for the comps, 100% comp. And those days, the casinos, we knew everyone down there. They would be raking it in by the double bucket, as they say. So that's the comps. Nowadays, the comps died. The day the music died, the comps died. And Las Vegas then, as we just discussed, became, if you play $20, you get a drink at the bar. And everything is on the card, monitored, nothing free. Rounds of drinks are very slow coming to the table, and they want to see if you're still in play, in action. If you haven't lost your wallet, then the cocktail waitress will circle 3 times like a vulture to make sure you're well done before she brings another drink, or you're going to stay. So, I mean, those things like that, we've lost our hospitality giving to a degree, and I believe that will makes a big difference to the bottom line. And going
so
forward,
you were around for the Evel Knievel jump.
Evel Knievel jump, yeah, I must say, I wasn't impressed enough to get up and go see it, but I wish I had been there. Not that I'm into moribund and waiting for some people to drop, but yeah, we had Evel Knievel, and we used to have the
The Grand Prix.
Grand Prix. Thank you. He's obviously heard this story before.
No, I remember as a kid, right where the Forum shops are now, there used to be a giant Grand Prix, and they used to race there 3 or 4 times a year. And you would,
absolutely.
I don't know who you knew, but we would go up in the Rain Man suite, the big suite that was double decker and had the hot tub right on the outside, and there would be a bar and big party, and we would watch the Grand Prix, and it was a pretty cool time.
Oh yeah, excellent days. But as I say, they go back to marketing, that everything is strategy. Now it's the Electric Daisy Carnival, and I laugh because I'm way past the Electric Daisy age. But that draws, I just happened to look yesterday, 300,000. It's not coming this year because of the COVID, and maybe back next year. But there are certain events like that. Conventions are huge business here now, obviously. 60 to 70% of the total town's income. And unfortunately, they've all canceled for this year. I know people in banquets and stuff like that. Catering, where they would be sold out for next year, is about 20%. But of great interest, they're about 80% for 2022. So there's hope on the horizon.
Yes.
Awesome. So I know that very interesting stories, Ed, and I haven't heard all these stories, Jimmy, believe it or not. My dad keeps a few in his back pocket, but I'd like to move along because I want you to talk about your own business that you had here. So those might remember or might know the Review Journal comes out with a Best of Las Vegas poll every single year, right? And now it's got 1,000 categories and editors and readers poll. But the very first poll that came out in either 1980, 82 or 1983 was the best restaurant in town was actually my family's restaurant. So my dad made a transition from at Caesars to open up his own restaurant. So that's a segue. So tell us how you became the best restaurant in town from being taking care of Frank Sinatra. That's an interesting transition. I'm sure people want to hear about.
Prior to that, we roll up as a family up in Toronto. We moved there for 2 years. I had a mini partnership in a Hogan's Inn, and he had a restaurant that had the very finest of china, linens on the table, lamps, glasses brought in from Czechoslovakia, Limoges china, for those that know the language. Everything was top of the line, but his prices were very reasonable. And that brought in people. We were in Aurora, which is about 30 minutes south. Who cares? We're not driving there tonight. But we were jammed 3 months in advance. It's just that the weather was brutal. Probably about, we won't go over the weather report, but freezing for 3 months. Let's leave it at that. And I'm looking at this guy in the restaurant with just this very simple concept. And I said, you know what? I can do that. So we came back, your mother and I, to Vegas. Some relatives, Ali and Stu, picked out a spot which was previously a pizza restaurant, but in an excellent area, Rancho, right on the back of Rancho Circle. And by that time, we had established Tom Jones would come by and bring people. Sinatra once, maybe twice, but the rest of the stars that we had developed relationships with started bringing people that they had, and we were backed up, as I say, on Rancho Circle on one side, where the mayor, everybody lived. The who's who of town lived there, and so we were just jammed every night. Fair prices, in all modesty, excellent food, and in far more modesty, brilliant service. My number one son was one of the crew there,
Yeah.
and the price was right, and would be booked out only a 55-seater, unless the fire department was coming. Then we cut back to 40. That's a joke. It's a joke. Okay, there's no statute of limitations on that. But the thing being is that we would just be booked up a month and a half in advance, and that was.
You haven't mentioned the name yet.
I lost you there, but what? I hope you're not looking.
You haven't mentioned the name of the place yet.
Carry on.
Is my sound going out? You haven't mentioned the name.
The name was the Aristocrat.
Wow.
The Aristocrat restaurant, and we had, which was very unusual because it came under a grandfather clause. We also had a small bar in that restaurant. And that, in those days, people used to drink their 3 Manhattans or martinis. And so we could, I wouldn't say bump up the price on the liquor, but we also were the highest restaurant outside of highest selling restaurant for wine outside of the hotels. And we used to have a very, very small, but very, very, here again, inexpensive, but very, something that my son would be proud of if he was drinking in those days. But the Aristocrat restaurant, and we were there for 8 years before we went on to open up Spanish Trail. But it was very, very good to us, and we enjoyed it. It was a blessing. One person that came back to me, as if you want to go back a little further, a person that I was feared of serving because I'd heard so many things and had a very dour presence about him, was Nixon. I had, when I worked at the American Embassy, I would do special events, and we worked mainly at the Hotel Creon for visiting dignitaries, ambassadors, obviously presidents from every country. And so I had to take care of President Nixon that one night. And in he came with 4 or 5 security guys, and it was a press conference. They weren't as grueling as they are now, but they were still grueling. So he wasn't in the best of moods, but I happened to know that he liked fine red wines. I was told him. I wasn't brilliant enough to go out in those days and see what our customers would want. He was only the president of the United States. But the fact being is that I had some wine from the Rothschilds that were very good friends of Ambassador Sergeant Shriver. He was thrilled. And he started opening up and talking. Where are you from? England. He was under pressure in France, very much hated there because of the Vietnam War. He was in town for the Vietnam peace talks, as a matter of fact. But he would ask, "Do you know anything about baseball?" "No, I'm afraid I don't, Mr. President." "But what do you do? Are you boys watch? What do you watch? You kick the ball and run after it." "Yeah, that's pretty much. We call it soccer." He said, "Oh yeah, well, we have football. You ever see football?" And so, well, what do you do? He said, "Well, what actually? You serve a few martinis and you make it." He was just a very warm guy. And as it so happens, a year and a half later, he was still president and opened the Kennedy Center, where your pal Al was maitre d'. I had the security clearance, set up the bar, and in he came. He looked at me like he'd seen me before. And I said, "Well, actually, Mr. President, we did have," he came 2 or 3 times in to Paris. So we established a little rapport. "Oh, yes, I remember you." I said, "Wine, sir. I got the Rothschild of Finest. Not before the show, but I'll be back later to see you." He said, "There's one thing I remember." He said, "You couldn't stand baseball." No, I said, "Now I'm an aficionado." I said, "I really love the sport." "Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that." He said, "By the way, how did you get in the country?" I said, "I mentioned your name, sir." And he laughed like I rarely see anybody laugh. But for a guy that was supposed to be mean and tough, he was a great surprise.
That is great, Mark. There's no reason to ask your final question, man. It's great.
I don't
You
know.
know what I think, though. You
Yeah,
know what
go
I think. Your dad is so full of knowledge, and he's so full of the past, and everything is so happy. You know what I mean? We definitely got to bring your dad back for a part two for sure. You know what I mean? Because there's so much that we could keep going and going and going and going, you know, because he's so much knowledge, and it's just happy stuff, Vegas, you know, and I've learned so much about the Vegas stuff that I didn't know because I'm not from here. But you know, when I came in, it was the 90. It was what 97 when I got here, so everything was much different from then till now. You know, and you know, like my wife and you grew up here. You know what I mean? And I hear stories all the time, but to go from the length where you were, Albert, till now, it's just amazing to me. I mean, this is just so enjoyable. What do you think, Mark? I mean, this is your dad, man. You got a dad that's just total full of knowledge and experience, and you know, this is great. It's great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, go ahead.
He's going to be looking for his pay from when he worked at the Aristocrats and other places that he worked for me. We were a little light, you know, his family. You don't, it should be a privilege to learn to be with us, but he's probably still bitter about not getting the full whack, but that's okay. He went in to do okay with his RHI, and you're doing very well with your Jimmy V and Jimmy V Live, and of course your business. And I have attended, not speaking because I'm biased, but you know, I've been to both of your classes and stuff, and very informative for anybody that is in business. These guys will take you to the next step. Okay, is that worth the $20?
Oh yeah, well, you asked me what's the appearance fee, and I said I can offer you the hat.
Oh yes, Jimmy V Live. I'll be looking for that.
Give me the hat, right, Mark? We'll give the hat, right?
Bring on the hats.
But let's wait till Christmas. I'll give it to him as his Christmas present.
There you go.
Oh, he learned from me. Obviously, that's what we do. Regift. We were regift a lot.
Yeah.
But it's just it's been fun. I hope that you did say yesterday that you might have a few guests from one era or another to sit down and talk. And I can see by the comments that there are people from when I was started in town that they also are back. And there's still a great deal of interest in the good old days. We just hope the good old days will come back.
It has to. If Vegas is going to go forward, they're going to mix them all together, as you know. But, you know, this was all unfortunate what happened, but it's a reset, you know. And to me, reset means kind of go back to the way it used to be, too. You know what I mean? And let's put the modern technology together with what used to be. And we'll be back to Vegas. Forget about the paying for parking. Forget about all these high fees. Let's bring Vegas back to what it is. And I know that all the industry is coming together, and everybody's so anxious for this to end just to get back and rock and roll now, you know. And it's just, you know, everybody's saying, let's do it already. And everybody knows that they have to wait for this to settle down. But I think that the world's going to be in store for one heck of a surprise with Las Vegas once we get going again. That's for sure.
I think you're 100% from your lips to God's ears, as we say. Unfortunately, as we all know, there are about 350,000 unemployed here.
Right.
What we need is obviously no genius here to put people in the seats. And the only way, as I said before, to get them back will be to give them value, make the way we were the way we are. And I think putting people in the seats will employ everybody. The casinos have to cut back on from, say, $1 billion profit to $500 million. Everybody goes home happy. I think that's the key.
There you go. Well, Mark, any last parting words for your dad that you see all the time?
No, well, I mean, yeah, we see each other a good amount and definitely chat. But it's a pleasure to have you on, Dad. Thanks for the stories. Learned a little bit, and a lot of our training that we're doing here and taking things to the next level. For those who don't know, our company, Restaurant Hospitality Institute, trains food server aptitude and restaurant aptitude, and there's actually nothing like this in the entire country. And it all got inspired from, I went to school for civil engineering and economics, but food and beverage was always in my life. And somewhere along the way, I decided that I like to eat and drink a lot more than I like to sit around or I like to eat and drink and talk to people more than I do sitting around and drafting materials for a building or something like that. So, and it all stems from a lot of the things that we learned, and thank you for that. And for you and Mom as well. So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was a family affair, and truly a family affair.
Yeah.
And Albert, I got one more thing from Sonia, my wife. There you go. There's a nice little thing there. There you go. Bring back Jubilee. We need those gals.
Yeah, I didn't ask what your wife used to do, Jimmy, and you mentioned Jubilee twice. So was she ever with Jubilee?
Well, no, she was in the medical field and
okay, good.
Photographer. But no Jubilee girl.
It's good. Really,
actually, you know what? I'm gonna make you laugh. Then we got to roll, but I will make you laugh. My business cards were actually made by a lady who was a Jubilee girl.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, good.
She was a Jubilee girl, and then she went into printing and doing all that kinds of deal. And she was real good at the printing the cards, so it was really good. So with
Excellent.
that said, you've been a pleasure, my friend. My co-host, Dad, pleasure. I wish my dad was still around to do his thing, but I tell Mark, hey man, that's your dad, man. That's great, So, Albert, thanks. I'll see you again at the next training for sure. You know that.
Absolutely. Welcome to the family, Jimmy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. All right.
In tradition, it's your round. Where are we going to hook up for a drink after? Okay, I'm joking.
All right.
You went pale all of a sudden.
No, well, me, I'm a Mountain Dew drinker. So someone once told me you're a Mountain Dew drinker, add vodka and call it a vodka dew. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, son, see you later. Good job to you, and well done, Jimmy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes,
see you soon.
Bye.
Well, sir, that was great. I had fun.
Yeah, no, it's always an entertaining meal for Christmas or Easter or birthdays and things like that. So we get to hear a lot of the stories, and it's good to have it, documented on a video now somewhere. So
there you go.
So when he's telling different versions of the story at later date, we can pull it up and say, no, this is what you told us this time, So
no problem.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give it away next week. I'm going to really push the guest next week. Okay, and another good one. We try to get the best people we can on all different angles. I don't want to give it away, but as we start going, I'll give little hints, and people will really get a kick out of it, this next person, and really will. And with that, Mark, anything going on this week?
Well, actually, we had a really good meeting today because as my dad alluded to and Delilah alluded to yesterday, unemployment is very high in Nevada, and we're looking at 30-40%. But our school, RHI, is actually certified by the state of Nevada to actually put people through training and rehabilitation. So with that certification, we had an excellent meeting with the Nevada Workforce Connections. So anyone who's looking for a job or looking for extra training, you can come to us and the government will actually pay for it. And we have state certified alcohol awareness cards too, and we'll find you a job. It's all in one, and the government, you play your angles over there and the government will pay for it. So hopefully people will see the value in that and start coming through the system.
Excellent. All right, pal. I'll see you next week, brother, okay?
Thanks so much, Jimmy. We'll see you.
All right, buddy. Have
Bye.
a good one.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.